Hi, my name is Donnese Tyler. I'm a wife, a mother, a certified life coach, an author, a former professional performer, and a heart health advocate from Maryland. For most of my life, I considered myself active, healthy, and constantly on the go. If you had met me before October 5th, 2022, you probably would have described me as someone who was always moving. In my corporate career, I worked as a contract manager, and back in 2022, I was working in a demanding, high-stress environment. As the stress continued to build, I began exploring what might be next for me professionally. That's what led me to complete the required training to become a certified life coach. At the end of September 2022, I fulfilled a dream that my husband had been encouraging me to pursue for years. I spent so much time explaining to him what women go through hormonally that eventually he said, "You need to write a book." So I did. I wrote and self-published, "I'm Not Crazy, I'm Hormonal." At the time, I thought I was helping women and the men who love them better understand the role of hormones in a woman's life. I thought the book marked the end of a journey. Looking back now, I realize it was actually the beginning of a completely new one. My calendar certainly reflected just how busy I was. I was serving as vice president of my son's high school mothers club, helping lead volunteer and fundraising efforts for the school. I was cheering my son on at his high school track and field meets, supporting my oldest son in college, and doing my best to show up for my husband, who needs quite a bit of attention too, along with family and friends. Before COVID, I had even been traveling and singing in a cover band. In many ways, I was doing what so many women do, trying to do it all. From the outside, it probably looked like I was handling everything beautifully. Looking back now, I realize I was carrying far more than I acknowledged at the time. And like many women, I just kept pushing forward because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. I was navigating perimenopause and experiencing hormonal changes that many women experience, but few openly discuss. I was researching wellness, trying to understand the changes happening in my body, and staying active. As a former performer, I was very conscious of my health, my fitness, and my appearance. That's why a heart attack never crossed my mind. I exercised. I stayed active. I had none of the traditional risk factors people typically associate with heart attacks. That was the first time I realized heart disease doesn't always look the way we've been taught. October 5th, 2022, I was 51 years old and attending one of our monthly Mothers Club meetings at my son's high school. I remember drinking a bottle of water and looking around at everyone like, how are they drinking this salty water? But, I brushed it off and didn't think too much of it. I certainly didn't think it meant anything serious. At the conclusion of the meeting, while speaking with some of the other moms, I felt a sharp pain and pressure in my chest, almost as if I had been hit with a baseball. And sarcastically, I asked, "Am I having a heart attack?" I proceeded to gather my things to head on home. Years earlier, when I was in my late 20s, I had experienced similar chest pressure and was rushed to the ER. At that time, I had been told it was likely severe acid reflux or gas. So, naturally, that's where my mind went this time. In hindsight, I've often wondered if that may have actually been my first SCAD. I'll never know for certain, but the similarities have always stayed with me. So because I had been told years earlier that it wasn't my heart, I wasn't thinking heart attack. I was thinking gas, acid reflux. I was thinking maybe I just need to go home, lay down, and drink a ginger ale. After all, I had things to do. I didn't have time for this, or at least that's what I thought. But thankfully, there was a nurse practitioner attending the meeting that night. As I described to her what I was feeling, another mom mentioned that I had been complaining about the bottled water tasting salty. I remember the nurse practitioner listening carefully, smiling, nodding, putting the pieces together. Then she looked at me and said, "Call your husband, because you're going to the ER." Several of the other moms had rallied around me at this time while she continued assessing my symptoms. I didn't want to cause a scene and call 911, so fortunately, two of the moms agreed to take me to the ER. I know I shouldn't have done that, but because something could have happened on the way, but I did. In that moment, I wasn't just surrounded by my fellow Mothers Club members. I was surrounded by women who genuinely cared. And one of them may have just saved my life. If she hadn't been there that night, I know I would not have gone to the ER. Instead, she trusted her training when I wasn't taking my symptoms seriously enough. I will always be grateful for her willingness to speak up and insist that I go get checked out. What started as a routine Mothers Club meeting became a life-saving intervention and a reminder of how powerful community can be. At the hospital, the doctors discovered elevated troponin levels in my blood, and that was the indication that some sort of heart trauma had occurred. Further testing revealed that I had experienced a spontaneous coronary artery dissection, or SCAD for short. I spent 4 days in the hospital while they ran tests. Thankfully, I did not require surgery. I had no significant underlying conditions, and the artery healed naturally within approximately 30 to 35 days. But healing physically and healing emotionally turned out to be two very different things. I quickly learned that SCAD is a tear in the coronary artery lining. I also learned that it disproportionately affects women. Researchers continue to study possible connections involving hormones, stress, pregnancy, and other factors. While I was in the hospital, the cardiologist who diagnosed my SCAD, who later became my cardiologist, spent time explaining that he believed what contributed to my heart attack. Based on my age, he believed I was likely in perimenopause, although that was never formally confirmed. He also explained that, in his medical opinion, my SCAD was caused by a combination of hormones and stress. At the time, I was trying to process everything that had happened. But as I reflect on my life, it wasn't difficult to see how much I had been carrying. The demands of a high-stress career, volunteer leadership responsibilities, family commitments, publishing my first book in a 7-day challenge, pursuing my life coach certification, and all the hormonal changes I was experiencing at that time. What I didn't realize then was how profoundly that conversation would change the way I viewed stress, women's health, and my own body moving forward. As I learned more about SCAD and connected with other survivors, I realized I wasn't alone. Many women shared stories of navigating hormonal changes, significant stress, or major life transitions around the time of their SCAD. For the first time, I was connecting with people who truly understood what I had experienced. That realization became a source of comfort as I began navigating the physical and emotional challenges of recovery. After I was discharged from the hospital, I specifically requested to go to cardiac rehabilitation. Not because my doctors told me I had to, but because I needed peace of mind. My SCAD didn't happen while I was exercising or doing anything physically strenuous, but that didn't stop me from being afraid that physical activity might somehow trigger it again. I needed to learn how to trust my body. I wanted to exercise while being monitored. I wanted reassurance that every sensation didn't mean something terrible was happening. Because after a SCAD event, every sensation gets my attention. Every chest feeling, every flutter, every gas bubble. Even today, I still look at a gas bubble, a chest sensation, unusual feeling. It immediately gets my attention. That's the reality of PTSD after a heart event. People often think recovery ends when you're discharged from the hospital. For many survivors, that's when a different kind of recovery begins. Cardiac rehab helped me rebuild my confidence in my body. It helped me realize that movement wasn't the enemy. But when cardiac rehab ended, I realized there was another part of my recovery that still needed attention, the mental and emotional recovery. Because while my artery had healed, the fear had not. That's when I decided to transition into counseling. I needed help processing the trauma of what had happened and learning how to manage the anxiety that often follows. Cardiac rehab helped me rebuild physical confidence. Counseling helped me rebuild emotional confidence. Together, they helped me begin trusting myself and my body again. As I learned more about SCAD, I became passionate about raising awareness because I realized how many women had never heard of it. The truth is, I hadn't heard of it either until it happened to me. And I kept thinking about how differently things might have turned out if that nurse practitioner hadn't been sitting in that Mothers Club meeting that night. Just 1 month after my SCAD, I did my first online interview and shared my story publicly. At first, it was simply my way of helping other women learn about a condition that most people had never heard of. But the more I shared, the more I realized how important awareness truly is. I designed and began selling SCAD awareness t-shirts and donating a percentage of the proceeds to the American Heart Association. I wanted to help further the conversation around heart health. Eventually, I reached out to the American Heart Association and asked a simple question: how can I help? That question changed everything. During Heart Health Month in February of 2023, I began sharing my story across every major local television news outlet in the Washington, D.C. area. I participated in radio interviews, print interviews, panel discussions, community events, and I had the opportunity to share my story on Good Morning America. What started as one interview became a mission. I wanted women to understand that heart attacks don't always look the way we've been taught. I wanted women to listen to their bodies. I wanted women to trust themselves when something felt wrong. And I wanted more people to know about SCAD before it happened to them. 7 months after my SCAD, I participated in the Lawyers Have Heart 5K, and alongside me that day were three very important people: my brother, my sister, and the nurse practitioner who sent me to the ER that night. There was something incredibly meaningful about sharing that moment with them. Months earlier, one of them helped me take the first step towards saving my life, and now all three were part of celebrating how far I'd come. And while I wasn't breaking any speed records, crossing that finish line represented something much bigger. It represented hope, progress, gratitude, and proof that healing was possible. One of the moments that meant the most to me occurred at the end of the 5K. The American Heart Association asked me to come up on stage and share my survivor story. Standing there looking out at hundreds of people gathered in support of heart health, I realized just how far I had come. Not long before that, I had been laying in a hospital bed trying to understand what had just happened to me. Now, I was using my voice to help others. The American Heart Association presented me with an award of appreciation that day, but the real reward was knowing that my story might help save just one person's life. Then, in the fall of 2023, AHA invited me to participate in their Leaders of Impact campaign. I was honored to finish as the runner-up for the fundraising campaign by raising just under $20,000 for heart health awareness and research. What started as a frightening diagnosis had become a mission. One thing I've learned is that healing doesn't happen in isolation. Life keeps moving. While I was sharing my story, raising awareness, and finding purpose through advocacy, I was also navigating a major personal and professional setback. In July 2023, I was unexpectedly laid off from my job. Suddenly, I was managing recovery while navigating unemployment and the uncertainty of finding a new position. Thankfully, 3 months later, I began a new contract management role with another company in a less stressful environment. But my relationship with stress had changed forever. SCAD taught me that stress isn't just emotional. Stress can become physical. And then, just when I felt like I had found my footing again, life handed me another lesson in recovery. In the spring of 2025, I signed my husband and I up for 6 weeks of pickleball lessons. I was active, feeling good, and enjoying being back in motion. Around that same time, I had come out of retirement to dance in a celebration of life honoring a beloved patriarch. Dance had always been a part of who I was. As a former professional dancer, being back in the rehearsal studio felt familiar, comfortable, exciting even. But during the second rehearsal on May 20th, 2025, everything changed. I made what felt like a very minor movement, nothing dramatic, nothing risky, just a simple move. And suddenly, I heard and felt what I can only describe as a karate chop to the back of my leg. I immediately looked behind me, expecting to see someone standing right there. But, of course, no one was there. I knew I had ruptured my Achilles tendon. Oddly enough, there wasn't much pain, just shock and confusion, and the immediate realization that something was very wrong. Later, the orthopedic surgeon explained that he believed small tears may have been developing during my weeks of pickleball lessons. And that tendon finally gave way during that rehearsal. What surprised me most wasn't the injury itself. It was the loss of independence that followed. After SCAD, I was afraid of my heart. After my Achilles rupture, I was suddenly dependent on other people for even the simplest things. Walking, driving, running errands, getting around the house, getting water, fixing food. It was also emotionally difficult in a completely different way than SCAD had been. For the first time in a long time, I couldn't simply do things for myself. I had to ask for help. I had to wait for others to help me. And I had to accept that recovery was going to take time. 10 days after the rupture, my husband introduced me to a red light therapy clinic and began taking me to appointments. At first, I didn't know what to expect. I simply knew I wanted to support my recovery in every way possible. As I moved through surgery, physical therapy, and months of rehabilitation, I became increasingly focused on supporting my body rather than fighting it. That mindset was very different from the person I had been before SCAD. Before SCAD, I would have pushed harder, done more, expected faster results. Now, I understand something different. Healing takes time. Healing requires patience. Healing requires support. I wasn't looking for a miracle. I was looking for tools that helped me to heal. The Achilles recovery is a long one. And even today, there are months when I think about how minor that movement was and feel a sense of caution. Because if something so small could cause such a significant injury, it's hard not to wonder if it could happen again. That fear may look different than the fear I experienced after SCAD, but fear is fear. And recovery is recovery. But that experience taught me something important. Recovery isn't about forcing your body to perform. It's about learning how to support it. That lesson has stayed with me, and it continues to shape the way I approach my health today. One of the unexpected gifts that came from these experiences is that they changed the questions I spend my time asking. Before SCAD, I was focused on helping women understand the hormonal shifts we experience throughout our reproductive years. After SCAD, I became increasingly aware of the relationship between hormones, stress, cardiovascular health, and the female body. I found myself asking questions I had never considered before. Definitely questions about stress, more questions about hormones, questions about recovery, questions about why so many women seem to experience significant health challenges during times of major hormonal transition. The more I learned, the more I realized how much we still don't know about women's health. As a result, I'm currently working on the second volume of I'm Not Crazy, I'm Hormonal. Because SCAD didn't just change my heart physically, it changed the way I think about women's health entirely. And then, just when I thought I had learned everything I needed to know about recovery, my Achilles rupture reinforced those lessons in an entirely different way. Both experiences taught me the same thing. You cannot override your body. You have to support it. For most of my life, I pushed through. I pushed through the stress. I pushed through the fatigue. I pushed through the discomfort because I had things to do. Today, I listen differently. SCAD changed the way I manage stress. One of the first changes I made was dramatically reducing my news consumption. Before SCAD, I would wake up watching the news and often fall asleep with it playing in the background. Today, I intentionally protect my peace. I begin and end my days with prayer and meditation. Not because life stopped being stressful, but because I've learned that how I respond to stress matters. I prioritize movement, recovery, sleep, and wellness practices that support my body. Following my Achilles rupture, red light therapy became one of the tools I incorporated consistently into my recovery routine. What began as visits to a clinic eventually evolved into regular use of both full body and targeted red light therapy at home as part of my overall wellness practice. Not because of a magic solution, but because healing requires intention. One of the most valuable lessons I've learned is that you don't find time. You don't make time. You have to prioritize time. Today, I intentionally schedule the things that support my health. Prayer, meditation, exercise, recovery, and most importantly, rest. And the practices that help me feel my best. Because if they aren't on my calendar, life will happily fill that space with something else. And after everything I've been through, I've learned that protecting my health isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's one of the greatest gifts I can give myself and the people I love. SCAD changed my life, but it wasn't the only challenge that forced me to rethink my relationship with my body. The SCAD heart attack, the Achilles rupture, the recovery, the setbacks, the fear, the uncertainty. Each experience taught me something valuable. Together, they taught me that you cannot override your body. You have to support it. They taught me that healing isn't always linear. The recovery takes patience. Stress matters. Hormones matter. And that our bodies are often communicating with us long before we're ready to listen. Today, when I share my story, my hope is simple. I hope another woman listens to her body. I hope another woman seeks medical care when something feels wrong. I hope another woman gives herself permission to slow down, recover, and heal. I hope another woman realizes she's not alone, because awareness saves lives. And because healing becomes possible when we stop fighting our bodies and start supporting them. If my story helps even one person ask a question, seek help, trust their instincts, or advocate for themselves, then every interview, panel discussion, race, television appearance, conversation, and shared experience has been worth it. I am a SCAD survivor, an advocate, and someone whose heart attack and Achilles rupture taught her the importance of listening to her body. And this is my story.